Hey everyone, this is Vivek, and in this video I'm going to break down the visa application process and all the procedures that you will go through before you receive your Emirates ID. Now, in case you haven't viewed my channel before, my name is Vivek and I've been running a business in the UAE since 2014. My current company is in a free zone, and everything I'm going to talk about in this video is my personal experience. So just a little caveat there before I begin. A lot of what I talk about is going to be from a free zone business owner's perspective. However, even if you are applying for a visa from a mainland company, the process really isn't all that different. Now, if you're not sure what I mean by free zone versus mainland and all of this, do check out my other video where I explain the differences between the jurisdictions. I'll also be referring to a lot of documents in this process, things like the e-channel and the establishment card. So if you don't know what that is, check out my other video where I describe all the important documents connected to your Dubai company. The link is in the description. Make sure you check that out before watching this video. So now let's dive into it. The first step in the visa process really is, well, it begins before with your company, where you need to apply for your establishment card and make sure that your e-channel is paid for. Once these two procedures are taken care of, you have a choice. You can either hire somebody to apply for your visa or you can do it yourself. Now, personally, I recommend doing it yourself if you have the time. If you are one of those free zone owners who's flying into the country and is on a bit of a, you have a time schedule constraint of some sort, then I recommend hiring somebody else. But even then, you don't need to hire any specialized help. The truth is, a lot of free zones actually facilitate this process for you, and they make it really simple. It really is as easy as clicking a button on their website and getting started with the process. The first step in the process is the security check. Now, this tends to be the longest part of the procedure, and it's also the most problematic. Now, as I explained in my other video where I spoke about the e-channel and the establishment card of your company, security checks go to Abu Dhabi security directly, and it's with their immigration department. From what I understand, it's actually a separate department within immigration, and really there's no way to understand how that department works or what the justification is for any of the decisions that they might pass. If you have a passport from, say, a problematic country, that is a country that doesn't have good relations with the UAE, or if you have a troublesome history in the UAE itself, you can probably expect your application to be rejected at that stage. So that is something to really keep in mind even before you open a company, as I've explained in my other videos. If you do not have any of those problems, the security check usually takes as little as 24 to 48 hours. Once the security check is complete, you can go ahead and actually apply for a change of status. Now, the change of status is the second step. Now, the reason you need to change your status is because when you open your company, you are going to be either on a tourist visa within the UAE, or if you're already working with another company and you want to shift your visa sponsor is going to be connected to that other company. So either way, you need to apply for a change of status. The change of status, you have two options. The first option is you can do it within country, and that costs a certain amount of money. I'm not going to list the cost over here because really the prices keep changing all the time, and also the jurisdiction from which you apply tends to affect the price as well. So do check with whoever it is you're using for this service to get the right price. So status change within the country tends to cost a certain amount. The second choice is, of course, you can fly out of the country and fly back in, and that is generally cheaper. However, in the overall scheme of things, I would recommend that you process your visa status change within the country itself, because once you add flight costs and once you add the extra documentation requirements of changing your status outside of the country, it just takes a bit longer, and really you end up paying a bit more anyway, because you have to add flight costs as well as the living costs from the country abroad. So once you process your visa status change within the country, what happens is they basically shift your status from, say, a tourist visa to a work visa, and that's pretty much it. It's a very simple process. It doesn't take very long. But before we move forward, I'd like to also explain how status change outside the country works. So say, for example, you're in the UAE, you've applied for the status change, and you decide to change your status outside the country. So what you do in that case is you fly outside the UAE. You need someone to actually file for the status change while you're outside the country with immigration in your jurisdiction. And once that approval goes through, you will be issued a new visa that you'll have to print out and then show it at immigration in Dubai when you land, right? So there's a bit of an additional process involved, and also there's the fact that it's a bit more of a delay, right? Because you need to account for leaving the country. Since you're not in the country, you need to rely on somebody else to process your status change or at least file the application. And then when you come in, you need to print out that document, which means you're going to be spending a long time in immigration. So this is why I recommend that you process your visa status change from within the country itself. Once that's done, you move on to the next step, or the third step, which is the medical appointment. The medical appointment is something that tends to freak out a lot of people, but really it's very straightforward. Essentially, the UAE government checks for two things. The first is they check for the presence of any serious disease such as HIV, AIDS, or tuberculosis. Now, once, if any of these diseases are detected, the UAE government actually treats you, and then unfortunately they will have to deport you because you're not getting a visa. However, most people do not have any of these issues, so really it's pretty straightforward. The way it works is you will be given an appointment, or rather you will apply for a time slot with the medical center closest to you in the jurisdiction. And then once you do that, you show up at the place, you'll be given a bunch of forms. And these forms are pretty straightforward, even though all of them will be in Arabic, but they're quite straightforward because there are people who will help you out. There's also many other people usually in the medical center going through the same process as you, so it really isn't that difficult. The first stage in the medical center itself is what's called typing. Once you approach a typist, this person will ask you for all your details. They will ask for something called your UID. Now the UID is also called I'm not sure what it's called. I think it's called the Universal ID, but let's just call it UID for now. The UID is really your number within the immigration system, and it will be printed on your visa. And this UID stays consistent no matter which visa you apply for. So when you apply for a tourist visa, you receive one UID. After your status change, that UID carries over to your residence visa. So the typist will ask you for all these details. You need your passport, you need your company name, etc., and all that stuff. Once it's typed in, you'll receive a bunch of forms and you go for your blood test. The blood test is the one where they try to detect for HIV. Pretty straightforward. Once the blood test is done, you'll need to go for an X-ray. The X-ray, they just take a chest X-ray, and essentially they're looking for any scars in your chest with that X-ray. So if you've had any injuries or surgery in the past that has produced a scar within your, that might show up in a chest X-ray, just make sure to inform the doctor first and also carry some documentation that proves that. Now, there is no formal process whereby you can notify the medical authorities of this in advance. However, that's just how the UAE works. You can always tell the person in charge in the center, or even ask your free zone in advance, or whichever jurisdiction you're applying from. Ask them in advance how you ought to handle something like this, and they'll advise you with regards to the best course. So once the medical test is done, you will be asked to return and collect the results, or you can have them couriered to any address of your choice. So again, I seriously recommend that you have it couriered, because it just saves you a lot more time. And if you're handling this procedure through the free zone itself, usually the medical center will send your results directly to the free zone for them to log it into the system. And that brings us to the next step, which is the visa issual. With the visa issual, it starts once your medical report is logged into the jurisdiction system. And once that is done, your visa is issued, and that's pretty much it. You're a resident of the UAE now. But there are a few things you need to keep in mind. The visa itself is not stamped in your passport these days in Dubai and the UAE. There is an electronic system. It's an app where you need to log in, and you will have a copy of your visa on that app. And there are a few steps to register for it, but again, it's pretty straightforward, and it's something that you do just once. Essentially, you just create a username and ID, and then you create what's called a UAE Pass, which is a separate app. It works as an authenticator app whenever you log into any UAE government app. So once you set all that up, you will be able to access the copy of your residence visa on that app. And then I recommend saving it, of course, in a backup storage of your choice. And once that's done, your Emirates ID processing begins. You will need to pay a fee for the Emirates ID as well. And once that is done, the Emirates ID is issued in an electronic format first, and then you will be mailed a physical Emirates ID. Now, at this point, there are a few things for you to keep in mind. Make sure that the phone number that you enter in the process, when you begin the visa application process, you will have to enter a phone number. Make sure you have that phone number in a working condition. Do not enter somebody else's number, or do not enter your friend's number or a temporary number or anything of that sort. Because if you do something like this, you will miss notifications. More importantly, whenever you want to change some information within your visa or your Emirates ID, you will need the OTP from that original number that you provided. So this is a problem that often occurs when people use external service agents, or PROs as they're called. The PRO enters their own number instead of entering yours, and basically you don't receive any status updates. And when time comes for you to actually change details for whatever reason, all the OTPs and details goes to that original number, and who knows if you're even in touch with that person or not. So you want to avoid that situation for sure. So make sure the phone number and contact details that you enter are legitimate, they are connected to you, and that you still have control over those particular numbers and addresses. The Emirates ID itself will be mailed to you physically. Now, this is something, the timeline for this really varies. It depends on the free zone itself. I know some people who received their Emirates ID within a week. Me personally, I received it in 20 working days, which was a long time. So it really kind of depends on the process and the procedure from where you apply for your Emirates ID. But either way, the Emirates ID arrives on time. And once you have that physical ID in hand, you'll also have a copy on the app that I mentioned previously. And once you have that ID is pretty much your visa and your proof of residence in the UAE. So if you leave Dubai and if you re-enter Dubai, you'll just need your Emirates ID, immigration, and the e-gates which are present in DXB. You don't really need to show your passport or anything of that sort. So it's a pretty smooth system. A few more notes to remember. Let's say you renew your passport, and once you renew your passport, you will need to change the information within the immigration file as well. Because sometimes what happens is your old passport number is connected to your Emirates ID. If you don't update that, you might, you won't run into any issues, but it's just a bit of a pain for you. And as with everything else with the UAE, you will have to pay money to change those details, but that's the price of going tax-free really. So that's the entire visa application process from the perspective of a free zone company owner. As I said before, mainland company visa application doesn't really differ all that much. It's pretty much the same process, to be honest. In fact, I think it's exactly the same. There's just a few differences early on. But really, the visa application process is pretty much the same, whether it's mainland or free zone, even across Emirates, it's exactly the same. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know of any questions in the comments below. And as always, check out my other videos in case you didn't understand some of the terms that I used. Links are all in the description. Thanks for watching.